So we've discussed the importance of culture. Now the question is, how is culture built? Well, to answer that question, I'd suggest that maybe we start by considering a Frank Lloyd Wright house. Falling water, for example. And then let's maybe get another picture in mind, a Mies van der Rohe skyscraper on Park Avenue, New York City. Think the Seagram's building, maybe with a Henry Moore sculpture out front. Bronze glass, beautiful stone. And then maybe just to round out the picture, we could get a $7 million McMansion on Los Olos Boulevard in our very own Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as three options. What do those three kinds of construction, what do those three structures have in common? And I'd suggest to you that they were all built using a generic set of tools. So perhaps it's not the tools that make the structure different. Perhaps it's the design and the design philosophy of the owners and the architects. Now, I'd like to consider maybe three areas as we carry on this discussion today. First, we should talk about the way most people do build culture, the way most management teams work, and that's culture by default. And then I'd like to move on and talk about doing something unique and special, culture by design. Perhaps the way we ought to be doing it. If we had our dreams, that's the way we would do it, doing it right. And then perhaps we could finish up by talking about what your unique design philosophy and design intention can create if we put it together with the best possible tools. Perhaps Fusion Group could have a part to play. So let's talk first about culture by default. Now, what we discovered is that most organizations are working on four basic tool sets: communication, sales, management, and strategy. Those are the four basic cornerstones of any organization. What do you do in your organization to teach people how to communicate your way? Answer? Nothing. They learned how to communicate when they were kids, and we haven't trained them to do anything different. Or at best, perhaps, we put them in front of an ex-college professor or an ex-high school teacher who says, never, ever, ever put your hands in your pockets. And once we've ground away some of the bad habits in most of our professionals, we're happy to put them out in the field and let them communicate and sell generically. So, culture by default. But let's move further. Communication is one cornerstone. Then there's sales. And what is the generic by default approach to sales? Well, we'd suggest that you hire accredited sales professionals who have a nice history and a nice background. You pay them well. You put together a good bonus program. You send them the literature from the organization and you say, call us in 3 months. Let us know how you're doing. And so what's frightening is, in large part, the design philosophy as regards sales management is hire good guys and get out of their way. Well, this also might be known as a generic philosophy of benign neglect. It's not a great way to get accomplished salespeople to produce highly and to feel certain about what they're doing. And quite often, generically, what this results in is a sales force that makes calls on the people they already know in their territory, having talks about whatever is of interest, including football scores and the weather. But if you want a sales force that's telling the same story, you're going to have to use more than the default tools and more than the default design strategy. Let's go further. What's the default strategy with regard to sales and management these days? I'd suggest to you that it's management by guerrilla. In other words, I am the manager, I am the biggest guy on the block, you do it my way, you do it the way I tell you. If you do anything else, it's your ass. Well, that's the generic approach, and it's used all over corporate America. It doesn't seem to make much difference whether the manager is a man or a woman or an old one or a young one. That's kind of the generic approach to management. Now finally, what about strategy? What's the default approach to strategy in corporate life these days? I'd suggest to you it's how do we make our numbers for next quarter? And usually our thought is, how do we make our numbers for next quarter when we're a little nervous about not making our numbers for next quarter, at which point management starts trimming expenses. They cut training. they cut new hiring, and eventually they start cutting people so that they have enough money left over that they can book as profit. It's a scary reality, and yet we've seen it going on all over the world in the last quarter. So the generic approach to corporate culture is survive, get by, do it my way, and do what you know how to do. What would that mean if you were to shift and think about culture by design? Well, let's take communication first. At Fusion, our approach to communication is to say that all business communication is conducted exclusively to achieve a business result. It's not about saying what you planned on saying. It's not about looking a certain way. It's not about sounding a certain way, and it's absolutely not about grinding away all the bad habits in the hope that you'll reveal something brilliant. Communication at Fusion is about getting a result vis-a-vis a particular audience. And so we built a strategy that says you work backwards from the desired result, from the desired outcome. Then you analyze the audience that you have today under the circumstances that they're experiencing today. And then you formulate the message in the simplest, most concise way possible so that you can make your play and have the negotiation and arrive at a credible business result. But that's just communication. What if we began to look at sales in a different light as well? What if we began to look at sales as counselor selling? So that perhaps we would teach our salespeople to view the sales effort as an effort to provide a service to the customer, the ultimate customer, the investor, the person who's going to buy the product. And then we worked back and said, perhaps we also ought to think about serving the financial professional who is the intermediary and make sure that we can help them build their practice and ensure their longevity as a professional long term. And perhaps to do those things best, we'd have to engage in listening as much as talking. What about management? Well, there's an old phrase in the industry called servant management. And taken from my father, who was a proud practitioner of servant management, the understanding is that when you become promoted to management, you're not the biggest gorilla on the block anymore. Now you're the person who's responsible for making sure that this guy is in shape to work, and that that guy has his problems handled so he's free to concentrate, and that this team knows their job, knows how they're expected to get it done, knows what the goals are, and they understand that they've got a component responsibility in making sure the organization makes its goals for this quarter. And if they do it, we're all going to benefit. Now, the last of the tools that we're talking about is strategy. It's not about trying to figure out how to make our numbers next quarter. It's all about trying to figure out that we're doing this in order to take the organization and everybody connected with it, the organizational community, to a loftier place. So there's something loftier than a financial goal. And that loftier thing is the vision about how this organization can serve the community of which it is a part. So wouldn't it be interesting if management decided to get together once a year and say, how can we take this organization to a higher place? Now, you've got an idea about the tools we use at Fusion. The question is, how do we put them together and give you guys the culture that is unique to you? Well, quite simply, we take these unique tools and we marry them to your message, which we can help you create, to your approach to selling and to your customer base, to your management team, teaching them hand in glove how to manage as servants, and finally, with your executive team to figure out the strategy to take you to a loftier place. If we were to take a second and summarize our perspective today, we'd say that there's culture by default, the ordinary way. The way we do it every day because we're not thinking about anything else. It's the way culture is built across America. And then there's something totally different. There's culture by design, which perhaps is the way we ought to do it. Maybe we ought to think a little more deeply about how we sell, how we manage, how we strategize, and how we communicate. And if we did, and we married those unique perspectives with our own special flavor of what this organization is and what it can become, we'd be in a position to have a cultural masterpiece and a profitable culture as well. Hey, we're looking forward to help you build your masterpiece, and Fusion Group is ready to go to work today.